All right, everyone. Good morning. It is 9 o'clock on the dial. Out of respect for everybody's time, we're going to get rolling here. We'll start with Matt going over a few ground rules for the webinar this morning.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. Just a few quick items as we normally go over. We are recording this webinar today. It will be up on our website and our YouTube channel. So if you ever want to refer back to it, you will be able to, or even share it with board members or your super if they're not on today. If you have any technical issues, please put those into the chat feature at the top of your screen, and I'll do my best to help you through those. Just be aware that many times the culprit is your Wi-Fi signal. If you have any questions today, please put those into the chat feature as well, and I will prompt Greg as needed. If everyone can remain muted while Greg is presenting, that would be awesome, so there isn't any background noise. Additionally, there is one button I'd like you all to avoid hitting. It says present screen or present now. Please do not click that, as that will interrupt Greg's presentation. And finally, if anyone has joined via telephone today, if you could just send me an email at mfrey@pghq.com, that would be great. That way we can make sure you get your MSR credits. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. So the genesis for our webinar this morning came out of a question, a comment from our education committee about doing some things with our allied associations and most notably the Superintendent Association. So having a long-time relationship with Greg and some of the folks at the Philadelphia Association of Golf Course Superintendents reached out, and they said yes. So my man Greg here, Greg is the superintendent at Concord Country Club. Greg was started there in 2010. Greg is a Penn State alumnus. He's also the treasurer of the Philadelphia Association of Golf Course Superintendents as well. He became the facility manager at Concord in 2013. So he has the pleasure of dealing with pool and racket and paddle and all that wonderful stuff, along with the golf course and also the clubhouse. And then Greg's pedigree goes back to White Manor, Aronimink, Marion, and Chester Valley as he ascended his way to Concord Country Club. I think one of the cool things about Greg and his team at Concord, if you've all noticed since he's been there, is the golf course seems to get better every year. And that doesn't happen by accident. You know, obviously Greg's wonderful at what he does. He has a good team, but then he also has a great working relationship with Mike and the leadership there. So, you know, that type of stuff just doesn't get done unilaterally generally. So, you know, as Greg and I were kind of talking through today's webinar, you know, I asked him, I said, listen, hey, give me 10 things you think, you know, every facility, you know, should know about or, you know, you would like to see any golf professional know as far as the superintendent professional relationship, and maybe even some, you know, some specifics to agronomy that, you know, everyone should know. So that's really, you know, where we got to today. And, you know, just want to thank Greg for his time. And it's all yours, buddy. Thanks.
Good morning. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate everyone being here and the opportunity to present. As Jeff kind of said, I was really just, as we talked, just trying to focus on a couple different things and really just developing the superintendent and the PGA professional relationship, as well as giving you guys some basics of what we do without getting too technical. Very fortunate to really in my career at Chester Valley, working with Jonathan Doctor, and now going into my 11th year with Mike, I've been privileged to work with two great PGA pros, which I'm, you know, happy to call not only colleagues, but friends, and kind of just some things that I've learned along the way in my career and navigating the journey that I think could help both sides. So with that, Jeff kind of introduced me, but one thing I just wanted to mention that I put in bold is, you know, in my 10 years, and Mike's now been 25 years at Concord, we're on our 5th general manager. And so I think that's something that, as this club business seems to evolve, the general manager turnover really seems to be much higher than the professional and the superintendent. And I think something that's really helped Mike and I bond is, during those transition times, we've really had to stick together because the new guy seems to be, he's on his honeymoon and can get what he wants at times, and a lot of times wants to bring his own people in. So I've really found that our relationship, both working and friendship, has really strengthened as we bonded together through this general manager change. And hopefully now we have a really good one, and I hope he sticks around. So wanted to start with communication. One of the things my baseball coach used to always end every practice with was saying that communication is a two-way street. And that really proves true with the PGA professional and the superintendent. Many times we're equals. Every club has a little bit different arrangement. Sometimes one reports to the other or vice versa. But in a lot of cases, we're of equal, stature at the club. And it's not always a level playing field. As you guys, as PGA professionals know, whether the food stinks or the golf course stinks, you're always the first person people see after their round. And so as a superintendent, we really rely on you to kind of have our backs to answer the questions that we know may be coming. And it's also our job to communicate to you what's going on. And that's why I say it is a two-way street. And so, as a superintendent and a lot of my colleagues, we hope that we try to give you the information that you can relay to the member, because you're much more in front of them, and you're able to help kind of distribute the message that we would like out there, and kind of the facts versus, sometimes people's opinions. And the other thing to kind of make note of is your skill level gives you instant credibility. I've found that at every club that I've worked at, the better the golfer at the club and the PGA professional skill, it really gives you credibility on not only the golf swing, but sometimes conditioning of the course. And so I think it's certainly important to take that into account when you say something to a member. And that's why, as I said, it's important that we communicate to you, what exactly is going on. Just a little aside, a story was kind of ironic. When I interviewed for the job at Concord in 2010, at my interview, my first Greens Committee meeting, and probably my first 5 months, everyone seemed to have the same issues. They were what I thought minor issues, but they always talked about the grain and the legginess of the greens and the lack of definition from green to collar and to rough and the different heights of cut. And, ironically, at the time we had a PGA professional, a touring pro at the club. And my first opportunity to meet him was my first summer there. It was probably June. So I'd been on the job for 6 months. And my first conversation, the exact things he said that were issues with the golf course were what every member had been telling me for 6 months. And so it just goes to show you the weight that person's opinion held. To be honest, I'm not even sure his opinion was right, but it seemed like when he spoke, everyone listened. And I think that really works the same way with you guys. And that's not just you as the head professional, but also to try and help, communicate to your staff, both your assistants and whoever's in the shop, that they have the same information, especially as they're out there playing with members, that they know exactly what is going on. And if we all work together, we'll all be successful for the best member experience. So how to develop the relationship. As I said, communication is the key, and regular meetings. I try personally to find myself in the golf shop every day that I'm there, asking questions, getting feedback. As I said, Mike and I have a great relationship where he'll tell me what he's hearing, as well as his assistants now are both very tenured. Playing together, I think it's important as a superintendent to understand the playability of golf and seeing things from a member's eyes versus just riding around in a cart. And as a superintendent playing with the pro, I think not only can you guys develop your relationship, but you can kind of see things and kind of come up with ideas, formulate plans, and as I said, continue to communicate. Attend respective committee meetings. I try and attend golf meetings when needed. I won't say that I attend every one, because sometimes it doesn't involve me. And conversely, Mike's been great as we've done a lot of master plan work and attending our meetings. And I think that really helps us understand what each other is doing and the challenges that we face. Because just like we don't understand what you as professionals that go through, you don't understand all the challenges that superintendents go through. And I think the better we can understand each other's challenges, the better we can work together. And as I kind of started with, is to bond together and really make sure golf is a priority. Now, not everyone on here is at a country club. Some of you are exclusively at golf clubs. But as I found, as country clubs have evolved, now golf is still important, but we're all fighting for the same dollars. There's a lot of board members with different opinions on where the money should be spent, and that's not always golf. So working together to help to make sure golf is a priority, because as I make a note at the bottom, historically a general manager is not evaluated on golf. If the golf course is in good shape or the instruction program's going great, that doesn't always reflect them. And so I think they want to try and make their mark, as there's a lot of constant turnover with them in terms of improving the food and beverage or other amenities inside the club. And so if the professional and the superintendent can kind of team up and work together, I think the golf course and the golf program can kind of continue to elevate itself. Something else that's important to talk about in terms of communication is play. I don't always know that the golf shop understands the impact of sending people where maybe the green staff didn't understand or expect, and vice versa, right? So one thing I've realized is you guys just want to get people on the golf course with as little interruption and as little complaints as possible. But understanding that does affect our day. And even something as sending someone off the back nine at 8 o'clock in the morning can really reduce efficiency for the rest of the day for a superintendent. So I think it's important to be on the same page of where people are going each day. Again, through a weekly meeting or a monthly golf calendar, and just making sure that if changes come up, because they do, whether it's for weather or tournaments change or more people show up, that's communicated. Something else is outings and shotguns with them. Mondays or at other clubs, Tuesdays traditionally is the only day that the golf staff or the green staff has uninterrupted to try and get as much done as possible. And a lot of times that's getting spray applications out and allowing them to dry before people can access the course. And so it's important that all shotgun times are communicated so that the green staff isn't caught off guard when they're on the 17th hole finishing something up, and an outing that we thought was at 1 o'clock is now going at 12:30. So again, just going back to making sure that everyone's on the same page. And then finally, range maintenance. Whether it's picking the range, which seems to tend to typically be from the golf shop staff, or maintenance of the range from the green staff, is making sure that there's enough time to maintain it, and that start times and closing times are communicated and both people understand it. There's nothing worse for us as a green staff to have members come up and start wanting to hit balls when we thought it didn't open until 7:30 and it opened at 7 and it's not mowed yet. Doesn't look good on either side of the operation. And so having those set hours or communicating the changes with daylight is certainly important.
Hey, Greg.
Yes.
Question. So talk a little bit about the difference for a superintendent in managing grass or agronomy and managing for golf.
Well, certainly growing grass is the easy part. When you start compounding it with a bunch of people walking on it or carts, it certainly becomes difficult. So it's trying to find that balance. I'll talk in a little bit about what affects green speed, but really anything you do to promote the game of golf or to promote conditions kind of takes away from what's healthy for the grass, whether it's lowering the mowing height, increasing the rolling, putting carts on it. So it's just really trying to find that balance, and really that's part of the job and one of the more difficult parts of the job. Does that make sense, Jeff?
Yeah, because I think you certainly see the pendulum either way, right? You'll see some operations that are solely concerned about managing the agronomy, which obviously they should be, but at the end of the day, everybody's there to play golf. So trying to strike that balance, I'm sure is sometimes difficult between the superintendent and the golf professional, when he has golfers that want to golf and the superintendent's obviously, trying to take care of the agronomy.
Yes, agreed. Talk a little bit about practice facilities and practice areas. I think at every club, everyone's seeing that practice is becoming more important to people. Time is precious. Not everyone has, 4 hours to play during the week. And certainly this year, as more people worked from home, I think we all saw an influx of people maybe first thing in the morning before they worked, or certainly after work on a nice afternoon. Just the increase in use of our practice facilities. And really, clubs are starting to realize the importance of this and starting to invest in them. And there's a lot of things that can affect the quality of practice facilities. Certainly, everybody is different, logistically what size they have. Not every club has a full size range. Some people have massive ranges like the cricket club. Others have real small ones. I mean, next door to Kennett, they have a small one. And I think one thing's important is that the tee size does matter. And I think it's important that people understand that as they go from place to place, why are we on mats this day and so-and-so is only on grass every day? And as I said, from an infrastructure standpoint, we can't all have the size tee. Something else we're seeing that's been very well received, I think, and we've implemented now, this will be our second year, is the use of warm season Bermuda grass. If you think about not only the climate change as the summers have gotten hotter, 2020 was the second hottest summer, I think, on record in the last 50 years. The last one was 2011. And the use of Bermuda grass and the divot recovery and the ability to maintain a grass surface. But when you can't have grass, I think it's important that clubs realize that the improvements in the technology of mats and how they can mimic playing conditions has certainly improved. And sometimes that the investment in them, although upfront, is certainly costly, I believe that can benefit the membership in the long run. And then something to mention too is as you're given lessons, your assistants or your directors of instructions are given lessons, is to really teach people how to practice properly from a divot pattern. You've seen a lot of stuff now with social media about, tour players and how they take, real small divots. And I'll show a picture here in a little bit where I think it's important that we, as we get new golfers, both from a superintendent side, but also a PGA professional side, is to really try and instruct them to use proper practice habits, and I think that will benefit the facility for everyone. And so, as I mentioned, you're seeing a lot more clubs investing in practice facilities. About 3 years ago, we made some improvements to our facility at Concord. I know some other area clubs have as well. Whitford recently, I know Lancaster's doing something right now. And really the ability to practice different shots from different yardages and the implementation of targets, whether they be target greens, the use of bunkers, or even just, flags in the middle. And this is something we did at Concord, and I think it's been very well received. I know even just last year when we had the senior section championship, a lot of the participants were complimentary of how it's improved. And I think it's something that for our membership, they've really seen the return on investment, maybe not from a financial aspect, but in terms of their ability to utilize the practice facility to improve their games. But with that comes maintenance. And I think it's important too to know that if you're going to try and improve your practice facility, you need to make sure that you're funding it properly for the superintendent. More use means more seed to repair, more soil to repair, even just the target greens out there. At Concord, we spend about $4,000 an acre on tees and fairways a year for pesticides and fertilizers. And so just adding those target greens, which is about an acre in sod, is an extra $4,000. And to make sure that if you're going to do these improvements, that you then make sure in your operating budget you have the financial resources to maintain them. And then finally, as I mentioned, using instruction, whether it's some of your bag staff up, replacing balls, or someone giving a lesson, is to really try and teach people how to use a proper divot pattern so that divots can recover. And everyone has their own method or preferred method, really depending on, the club's preference or the grass type used. But regardless of what they are, and this is just something I took off the internet, is to really try and educate the membership on how to not just go up there, hit 80 balls and destroy the tee where it'll take a month to kind of recover. So I think it's something that's here to stay. As I said, as time is certainly of a priority for people, and trying to get people out to the club. Maybe someone comes up after work and meets the family for dinner, and you can gain that dining revenue from it. But I think the more clubs can place a priority on mimicking course conditions with their practice conditions, the better the club will be, and the better, the instruction program for you guys, professionals, as well as the golf program. So as I kind of said first, just make sure you have the proper resources as well as the time. Jeff had asked to kind of talk a little bit about master planning. What goes into it? What is it? Some clubs are more familiar than others. Fortunate to have some experience at 3 clubs I've been at with some master plan work. And really every club should have a master plan, because really it's just a goal to aspire to. If you're not evolving, if you're not trying to get better anymore, you're falling behind. I think we've all seen over the last 9 months or 10 months now since COVID an influx in members, but how long is this going to be here to stay is to be determined. I don't think anybody knows, but the one thing that we've seen both throughout the area and the country is the clubs that are investing in themselves are the ones that are kind of thriving in these times, but also surviving in kind of the more lean times going back to 2008, 2009. So really a master plan is just a long range goal. It's something to aspire to, but it has a lot of benefits. It can really help a club from a holistic standpoint with capital planning. It can reduce the subjectivity of committees and boards as they change. I think all greens chairs come in with the right intentions, and all board members, but sometimes it's hard to put aside their personal wants and needs. And I think a master plan is a document that can really reduce their ability to, I don't want to say manipulate, that's the wrong word, but to kind of have say in what should be done to the course. At Concord, we adopted into our bylaws, the master plan cannot change without a vote of the membership. And part of that's for reasons that I just said, but it also helps with consistency. It's going to the doctor. The doctor is the expert. You're not telling the doctor what you should take as a medicine. And conversely, each club, that hires an architect and a superintendent and a professional, they're the professional, and it's taking the kind of the subjectivity out of it. Master plans can vary from course to course. They can be real small, and they can be massive overhauls. And just to kind of a couple pictures here of just the variety of what a different master plan can be in terms of scope. So what should it include? You really should include all skill levels, from your low handicap or PGA professional up into your high handicap and ladies, making sure you have tees for all of them. Adjust for changes in technology. As probably a lot of you read, the USGA and the RNA released something yesterday, their study on ball distance and the suggestions they make to change. And I know Webb Simpson said something last night with his opinion, and then obviously Brandel Chambly ripped him, which isn't anything surprising. But I think it's to take into account how the ball's changing, how technology's changing in terms of mowing heights, course maintenance. We're mowing greens now at historically low heights compared to where we used to be. And that really increases green speeds, and a lot of times reduces your ability to spread traffic or put pins on greens. And I think that has to be taken into account in master plans, that 100-year-old greens can sometimes be obsolete and need to be adjusted. For a lot of courses that are older, it's to really think about what the original architect intended. Courses can evolve over the years and decades, and to try and really not lose focus of why things were done. And then finally, to account for maintenance costs. You don't want to do a master plan and build 200 bunkers if you have a limited maintenance budget, because all bunkers are is maintenance. And so I think one thing that's important for a committee and a superintendent and hopefully a pro working with them is to make sure that where your budget's at, you can maintain any changes to the golf course. And if not, can the club afford the changes or the cost increases that are going to come as a result of this change? And that can be something as the ability to hand mow versus triplex greens, or as I mentioned, bunkers. So here's our master plan. This has kind of been, for me, you know, a 10-year plan that we're coming down the home stretch of, and we'll finish here this fall and probably into next winter. And as I said, it encompasses everything from mowing lines to new tees. And if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you can kind of see everything that it encompasses. Tree removal, cart path removal, greens that need to be rebuilt, tees that need to be rebuilt, or bunkers that are kind of either go in or be replaced. So as I said, this was a long-range plan and proved true for us at Concord. You know, this is something that we formally approved in 2016. We started working on really in 2012, and it'll take us until 2022 to finish. So as I said, it varies. Here's a picture of our original third green. We made some changes to that to really try and regain pin locations that we lost and go back as the green had shrunk significantly over the years. So that's something that's, you know, a little bit maybe not noticeable to the golfer, but I think once it's done is a nice improvement. And as a superintendent, you can kind of find new pin locations to spread the wear. And as a professional that's setting up tournaments, you can certainly adjust the difficulty of the hole based on the pin location. As I mentioned, bunkers have a lifespan. The USGA says 7 to 10 years. I think with new liners that are coming in, maybe that's a little bit longer, but to incorporate what bunkers need to be rebuilt, moves for changes in technology with fairway bunkers and such, all stuff that should be in a master plan. It can be a grand scale. Here's what used to be our old 14th hole. We cut into 2 holes. For those that have played Concord, you know, when I interviewed for the position, everybody said, "Oh, nice golf course," except for that one hole on the back. People call it one of the worst holes in the section. Most would agree, and our master plan, you know, incorporated eliminating this, and certainly was a financial investment for the club. But I think something that we've seen from it is the pace of play has gotten a lot better, and we've been able to put more rounds through the golf course, and it's been easier on Mike and his golf staff. So it can be something as large as that, or as simple as, you know, our second green, which was built in 1927. When we had it GPS at today's green speeds, we were able to put a pin on 8% of the green, which meant that 8% of the green where pins went really got worn out by the end of the year, and there was very little grass. So we ended up rebuilding it, flattening it, but still making it severe as a short hole that putting it wasn't easy. So similar to our 11th green was another one where when we had this GPS, there was only 18% usable pin locations. And we made some adjustments where now it's still a very challenging par 3 with a sloped green, but we're now up to about 48 to 50% usable pin locations. Here's just a little bit of detail of a greens drawing to adjust for grades based on pin locations and the ability to make sure you have a variety of them. And then finally, trees. This is our 18th hole. Trees are a living, breathing thing. They mature, sometimes die. We've seen an influx first with the elms about 15 years ago, and now we're seeing a lot of ash trees dying with both the emerald ash borer, which is an insect, and ash yellow, which is a disease. So one thing that our master plan incorporated and all should is tree management, and not only from a shade issue, from a growing thing. I mean, that's certainly a popular topic now with all golf courses is tree removal, but the fact that certain trees aren't going to be around in a couple of years. And so in 2016, when we approved this, we thought that these trees probably had a 5-year lifespan left. We were fortunate that they got that far, and they've since been removed. And as part of our master plan, this is what's going to be our new 18th hole. So where those trees came out, you'll see bunkering. And so all these things, master plans should consist of, and make sure that as a committee and as a PGA professional working with the superintendent and the grounds committee, that we incorporate. And then, as I said, just subtle changes. This is the 8th hole, just recapturing from the old aerials, some greens that have encroached over the years, and widening, although that's a downhill hole where you're really not running shots up to that often. For someone that perhaps does hit some type of a low shot, it brings that left bunker into play, but also allows a run up to the green. One thing that I think can be done now with technology is to help sell a master plan is the use of technology and really conceptual drawings. You know, similar as you're building houses, you can kind of use a lot of AutoCAD programs to show what a house will look like. You can also do that now with golf courses, and to use this to help sell it, because it's difficult for a member to envision changes on something that they may have to either vote on or be assessed for. But I think if you can show them what the end result will be, certainly for us, the use and $1,000 that we spent for these conceptual drawings, I think really made a difference in terms of getting approval for our plan. So I would encourage clubs to really take this into account when they're trying to sell something, is to really try and show the members what they can have. And we've used this now. We're starting to work in a clubhouse master plan, and we've started to use some before and afters to try and help sell that as we move forward with that. So just a couple before and afters for you, and just to see what you can certainly, how things can evolve and change. This was the 2nd hole before and after, and then our 9th hole before on the top and then after on the bottom. And I think when you show that to people, especially if you're not doing every hole at once, again, it can be a great sales tool to kind of keep going and to keep the capital funding coming. And then the role of the PGA professional in master planning, and I really can't, I know he's on here, so I'm not to brown nose him, but you know, Mike has been a tremendous asset to the club and helping us with our master plan. And I hope that all PGA professionals that are listening really, not only to help the superintendent, but also to sell to the membership. You guys more than anybody know the skill set of the members. You know the ladies to the low handicappers, and can really help incorporate all skill levels into a plan to make sure that the course plays fair and fun for everybody. Typically, you play more than the superintendent, and you have a very high understanding of strategy. When you bring an architect in, he's coming in for a day. You guys as the professionals are there every day, and you can really know how holes play different times of years. And, you know, in terms of, as I said, from different sets of tees and where bunkers should be placed, where trees should be placed, the impact of bunkers, the impact of pin locations. And so you guys are a tremendous asset in terms of development and execution and the salesmanship of this. And I hope that everyone can kind of learn a little bit from today of how they can, you know, really help with that. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of times at clubs, the better a player is, the bigger their opinion on how a golf course should be designed, right? Everybody seems to have the armchair architects, and it seems to be the club championship has the strongest opinions. And I think the PGA professional is really good in helping to manage that. Because as I said before, sometimes those people, what they say resonates. And I think, as I said, more so than superintendents, you guys can kind of help kind of keep those egos in check. So how can you get involved? Go to green committee meetings. As I said, you know, the pro goes to green committee meetings and the superintendent goes to golf. It'll be better. Be assertive with the architect. You know the course, you know the playability of the course. The superintendent knows the agronomics. So be vocal, be assertive. Again, Mike was very assertive with our architect at times where he probably corrected some errors before they happened because he was able to give him feedback or something he may not have thought about. Solicit the feedback from the membership and watch members play. One thing that I try and do, and I encourage a lot of our golf shop staff to do, is just whether it's sitting on a hole and watching where balls land or playing with members, because you can really know where, hey, so-and-so hits it over here where we may not think it is. And then finally, you guys play a lot of tournaments away, and I certainly, and I think most superintendents, encourage ideas from other people, just like sports and the NFL, right? It's a copycat league. If we're able to take ideas that other clubs have implemented and had success with, and put them in our operation or bring them back to our golf course, it'll only help our membership. And as you guys play a lot of different places and tournaments, and you see things, kind of make notes of that, and try and incorporate them into your place as well. So, is there any questions, Matt or Jeff, on master planning or anything I've said so far?
Not at the moment.
Greg, one of the things that I've heard and I've seen was kind of the intent. So, when you all went and built some of your forward tees, you built them almost, you built them in the idea that they look like they were always there. So instead of just, mowing a square in the rough or building up a box, you kind of built them into the contours of the fairway where it looks like, the intent and the purpose was to, make them like they had always been there.
Yeah. So some of them have actually been redone because the ladies weren't crazy about that. But I think that kind of goes back to one of the things about the master plan is to know what your budget is and to make sure you're not building too many tees where then you have to add another person out. So the idea with that was they were kind of incorporated in the fairway and can be mowed at no extra cost. And that was kind of the thought process behind that. So anything else? All right.
No questions have been submitted yet.
Okay. Just a little bit of basics on aeration. I think the biggest thing to communicate is superintendents don't like to do it either. Traditionally, it means long days. It means a lot of stress, not only on the staff, but on the grass. But it's something that's needed. I try and say it's like going to the gym, right? Not everyone likes going to the gym, but if you don't do it, eventually the wheels are going to fall off. And that's very similar with aeration. If you neglect it for so long, eventually the wheels are going to fall off on the golf course and the health is going to decline. The biggest thing with aeration is timing is key. And there's a lot of factors involved in that, whether it's revenue, whether it's weather, whether it's tournament play or outings. It's really important that each club discusses when they want to aerate and tries to fit it to their schedule. And there's really no golden rule for that. Everybody does it differently, and everybody seems to be having success with how they're doing it. Some of us have 90, 100-year-old greens that are composed of heavy clay soil. Others have brand new USGA spec greens. And if managed right, typically they can require less aeration because they're sand, which doesn't compact as much as soil. As I said, I don't want to get into too many specifics of agronomics, but just kind of keep it high level. But, 100 years ago when these greens were built, the clay was pushed up because they weren't irrigated. And they wanted them to hold water on these greens so they would stay alive. As technology's changed and mowing heights have come down and automatic irrigation's been installed, you now want the greens to drain for firmness and for green speed. And so as a result, those soil greens that are old, they compact and need to be relieved of that compaction. As I said, every course has different needs, and it's important to balance what's good for the grass and what's good for the bank account. And I think more clubs are really starting to take into factor outing revenue as in tournament play and try and schedule aeration as such. And just a shift in the dynamic, typically when I arrived at Concord, August was kind of a dead month. It was everybody went on vacation and then went back to school. And so that's when we aerated. But I think as things have changed, our membership's certainly gotten younger. I think we did 4,000 rounds this August, which is about 1,000 more than we traditionally had done. But even 3,000 rounds in August is not a slow month. So we've since moved our aeration. And that's why it's important that every course kind of looks at things differently. So I just want to go through real quick why you must aerate, and then kind of different types. There's a boatload of reasons why it's beneficial for the grass, but most importantly, it's to remove organic matter. It's to remove waste, just like the human body. I mean, it's not, you're not excreting your waste like the body is. You need to physically remove it or dilute it through sand. Improve the drainage, especially on the older greens. Promote the root growth, allow air into the soil to kind of release some of the toxic gases that build up, to relieve compaction, and on the older greens to amend the soil profile, whether that's put amendments that help hold nutrients in sand-based greens, or to kind of put sand into clay-based greens to try and help them drain better and remain more firm after rainstorms. And so this is what you see. This is a picture of a green that's probably was aerated 10 days ago. You can kind of still see the sand channels, the higher height of cut, and how it's going to be bumpier and not as fast as you hoped. But this is what a superintendent sees. As a result of aeration, that's the bottom of a cup cutter. That's a root coming out the bottom. And what that does is allows for not only a healthier green, but it allows for less water, less nutrients, and all sorts of agronomic benefits. So it's important to kind of look underneath and just not on the surface. Again, another picture of what we see, that's a sand channel going through a green, which will help kind of promote drainage and promote firmness after rain events. And doing that allows greens to be mowed faster after raining, as well as probably staying smoother and less spike marks. So what you see on top is not always as good as what's down below, and I think that's important to mention. So real fast, the different types of aeration, and there's really a lot, from needle tining and solid tining to hollow tining, deep tine, dry jet, drill and fill, and grade. And each of these have different benefits, and certainly everything has different disruptions to play. So just have a picture of each one. I want to talk a little bit about, the benefits of what each does and how it affects play. So first, I would say about a dozen years ago, the Toro company came out with this aerator, which they call the 648 Pro Core, which is kind of standard now in the industry. I would say the majority of courses probably have them. It allows you to do your conventional aeration, which is to actually pull the plugs. It can also allow solid tine aeration, or what they call needle tine aeration, which is a very thin, an 1/8 to a 3/8 inch just hole that can help kind of the health of the plant, and with minimal disruption. So that's what people consider core aeration, or the conventional aeration, or what a lot of our members say, punch. When are you going to punch is kind of what everyone says. But on top of that, there's a whole bunch of different options that have kind of come out over the last, 10 to 15 years that can have benefits and can affect playability a little bit less, and can be kind of done in season. So this is a deep tine aerator. Those are 12-inch tines. That's punching about a 10-inch hole into the green. You can see the roller on the back. And this is something that if you say do it on a Monday, by the weekend, the disruption is minimal. And certainly there's things that affect that. But for the most part, if you use a manageable size tine, this is something that can be done in season to have a lot of good agronomic benefits with minimal disruption to playability and tournament play. On the other hand, this is what's known as a drill and fill machine. And this is, I would say, the most disruptive to playability. Timing on this is key. But essentially, this is drilling and removing a 12-inch hole and filling them with sand. It's really used to amend the profile, specifically on old greens. Now, you will see some courses with newer greens that are sand-based do this from time to time. But I would say the majority of what they're doing is the older greens. This is our 18th green, which is an original green, which is now probably about 100 years old. As I mentioned, heavy clay, and we're trying to get a lot more sand in it to improve the firmness and the ability to mow after a rain event. So it's very disruptive. In fact, we haven't done it in 2 years just because we've been so busy. Would love to do it every year. Certainly is very costly as well, both for the sand, the labor to fill those hoppers, and then to contract the machines. And this is kind of what you're left with after you're done. There's so much sand and soil, the cleanup's pretty big, and the recovery of the grass, again, depending on the time of year and the climate, takes a long time, but your benefits are very significant if a club is willing to endure this, the growing pains of it. Your greens will be better, certainly, for it. This is a dry eject machine, much less disruptive than what I just showed you with the drill and fill, but can inject sand into the green on a tighter spacing, a much shallower depth, and with much less disruption because you're not physically removing any material as you are in the drill and fill. For me personally, this is, I think, a great tool to promote firmness. We do this the beginning of each April. A lot of times when you come out of winter, especially something right now like where there's snow on the ground, greens can be kind of soft and spongy. And you can get about 600 pounds per 1,000 square feet of sand in about the top 3 inches of this soil profile. And it really helps with spring firmness, really going into the summer as the humidity builds to keep the greens firm, which then helps with speed and smoothness. As I said, it is less disruptive and less costly than the drill and fill. And really, once that sand dries, it can be brushed in, and the greens are pretty playable pretty quickly, and the recovery is pretty fast. So this is about 3 days after the process is complete. While you can still see the holes, because you're not physically pulling a core like with conventional aeration, the effect on bowl roll is significantly reduced. I think other than the tree removal, in my experience at Concord, this is probably one of the better things that the club has implemented to improve the playability of the greens. And then finally, this is what's called a grade and sand injection. And this is, again, probably similar to the level of disruption of a drill and fill. The benefits of this is you're removing a lot of organic matter quickly. You can get, depending on your blade size, 10 to 12% disruption, and remove a lot of that thatch, reduce a lot of that grain, inject a lot of sand, which is going to give you firm greens, faster greens, and smoother greens in turn because of that. But again, very disruptive and very labor intensive as well. To do all 18 greens with this is, you're really taxing your staff, but it certainly has its benefits. So those are really the different types of aeration. Jeff had just wanted me to kind of go through what each one does, its benefits, and why we do them. And then most of the time after aerating, we're going to top dress, or superintendent's going to top dress, and depending on time of year, if it's too hot, generally they're not going to do that. But what this does is just kind of fills in the imperfections left from each hole. With a brush, a pull behind brush or a hand brush, everything brushed in can kind of help incorporate more sand, but also for putting smoothness. So that is really what I wanted to discuss on aeration. I don't know, Matt, if any questions have come in on that.
Not at the moment, no, sir.
Okay. So a couple things on course setup. And course marking and what affects green speeds. So I think marking, certainly with the changes in the rules of golf, has evolved a little bit. I think one thing as a PGA professional to keep in mind is the golf course is is the canvas to a superintendent. Most superintendents take pride in maintaining their golf course, and we understand where you're coming from a playability point of view and managing tournaments, and quite frankly, trying to reduce the complaints you get, right? If someone gets a bad lie and it's not painted, you're going to hear about it when they finish the round. So it's trying to find the balance of not marking the golf course up where every imperfection shows, because as I said, it is a pride thing with superintendents, and running a great tournament. And, a couple things suggestions or things that I've found have worked for that. And the first is really to tour with the superintendent before a member guest or a member, or any big event, maybe 10 days out, and say, well, here's my concerns that I have from a PGA professional point of view, and allow the superintendent to maybe sod those areas or repair those areas. Now, as the USGA's changed things with hazard marking and everything, is to, minimize your marking, use local rules. For example, find fescue areas rather than paint around every one of them. Make it a local rule on the scorecard that, after 3 minutes, if you can't find your ball, drop it as a hazard. Very similar to use lift, clean, and place. Again, kind of coming off of a weekend with Patrick Reed where there was some controversy regarding that. If you think it's going to be wet for an event and you're going to play lift, clean, and place, then it would be beneficial for the superintendent to not have areas painted as ground under repair. And it also minimalizes the work that needs to be done. And then finally, to mark the hazards properly. A lot of times hazards come on sloped areas, and it's making sure that your lines are areas where players can take relief from. If you're on a sloped hill and the red line or the yellow line's at the bottom of the hill, and a player goes to drop and the ball rolls right back in the hazard, well, that really doesn't give them a fair opportunity to take relief, and to sometimes make sure that those lines are at the top of the crest of the hill so that they can kind of go onto a flat ground, and that their ball can come to rest without rolling back in the hazard. And this is a balance and is always evolving with the superintendent and professionals relationship. I joke with Mike. He gets 2 cans of white paint a year, and that's all he has. And that he's, if he goes into a Lowe's or Home Depot, he's banned from buying that. Obviously, I'm kidding, but I think he, before he goes to paint something, probably hears me in the back of his head as not going to be happy. And that's an evolution of a relationship between the superintendent and the pro, to try and find that balance. Because the last thing any of us want to do is look at something we're not perfect at. And I think a lot of superintendents feel that way. And so as a professional, I hope that, rather than just going out and painting the place, that people consider that as well. And so that's all I have on the marking. I think I wanted to talk a couple things about, there's a picture of Mike marking. Sorry, I forgot I put that in there. And then last 2 things would be on what affects green speed and then course setup. So from a superintendent's perspective, there's a lot of things that we take into account each morning when trying to set up a golf course. And that's pace of play, that's forecasted wind for the day, that's projected green speed, and that's daily events. For example, on a ladies' day or a senior day, you generally want to have easier pins, right? For the most part, their skill level is not that of what you're going to have for a men's club championship. And for them, they're out there for some fun and some fresh air. And so 1, we don't want to penalize them, and 2, we want to get them through the golf course in a manageable amount of time. So, for us, we always say on senior day or ladies' day, let's make sure that we keep the greens or the pins in a manageable spot, as well as the green speeds at a certain pace. I think with wind, it's sometimes hard to forecast. Sometimes it can get windier and things can dry out, and pins that may look okay when you were cutting it in the morning after you just watered a green are not okay as things dry out during the day. And that's kind of finding a balance. And sometimes it's best to err on the side of caution. When you have your, as I say, club championships or men's events or lower handicap events, that's when you can start to tuck some pins, make that green speeds a little bit more faster. Generally, when you putt slow greens, you have to account for line and pace. When you're putting faster greens, a lot of times you're just having to account for line to get it to the hole. And so I know green speed is certainly a topic of conversation at every club, but I think it's important to kind of know the basics that go into what manages green speed and what affects green speed. So this is a picture of Darren Bavard, who is local agronomist and also now the championship agronomist for the USGA, managing or taking green speed at a US Open a couple of years ago. For those that don't know, that's called a stimp meter. It was invented to help superintendents manage consistency from green to green. Unfortunately, it's kind of gotten legs of its own where, everyone wants to know what greens you're stimping, and sometimes it can be a contest from place to place, and sometimes it can kind of get out of control. But it was invented originally to help with a superintendent get consistent speeds from green to green. Every club has different speeds or speed requirements, and I think it's important that a superintendent and a pro work together with their respective committees to kind of develop parameters or standards for what those should be, and really base that off your green type, your budget, and your membership demographic. So what used to be considered a normal green speed, 10, that was when I first got at Concord, what I say we would strive for daily. Probably now on an average are a little bit faster than that based upon our member expectations. But as I said, our resources have increased where we're able to produce that on a more consistent basis. They've also given us the investment in the infrastructure of the golf course to kind of produce those conditions. One thing I would encourage everyone to have at every club is a maintenance standard where you're really dictating a parameter within a foot of green speed from day to day, and then maybe another one for tournament play. A club like Oakmont, they pride themselves on the fastest greens ever, and they really they almost want to punish you when you're out there. And that's what their membership wants, and that they're all on board with that. I don't think a mid-level private club where you're having, ladies go out in the morning and then juniors and then seniors, that's really the best thing. But again, that's up to every club to kind of determine on their own. But really what I wanted to just touch base on is what affects green speed, because, it's difficult to get consistent speeds day to day when you're dealing with weather. That is the biggest variable for any superintendent's job. And, the best laid plans can be affected by the weather, whether it be rain or unplanned humidity or lack of humidity for, that you're not planning on. And so there's really two categories. There's environmental factors, and then there's mechanical factors. And so the environment growth rate, depending on temperature, humidity, time of year, the faster the greens are growing, the more it's going to negatively affect ball roll. Moisture, anytime after a rain, they're not always going to be as fast. Similar with humidity. When it's real humid out, the grass almost pulls some of that humidity down into the canopy. As a result, you're going to have less increased friction, and it's going to be slower or not roll out as far. And then finally, slope. The more sloped your greens are, obviously, balls are going to roll faster downhill than on a flat surface. Those are kind of things that are a little bit outside of our control for the most part. And I think it's important to communicate to your golfers that, if the putting green is the same as every other green, is to just figure out the pace on the putting green and manage it. The best golfers they really are the ones that can navigate the changes in green speeds. You know, Tiger Woods is as great as a golfer as he is, right? I mean, he really struggles with slower greens. He can't adjust. You know, he didn't win the Masters for, you know, obviously he had other injuries and personal issues, but you know what, 10 years ago, they really, although they don't release green speeds at the Masters, they slowed them down significantly. And you saw he really didn't win until, what, 2 years ago, when he was able to finally figure out how to manage the changes in speeds. So I always tell people the putting green is the same speed as the rest of the greens, and those environmental factors are really outside of a superintendent's control. And I think it's important that you guys as the PGA professionals help communicate that. It's amazing how much better people think we are at our jobs when the greens are faster, when really sometimes it's just the weather's better and cooperates more. But the things we can control are what I call mechanical factors, and that's the frequency of mowing, whether it's mowing once a day, twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. The height at what you cut at. The lower you cut grass, the faster the ball's going to roll. Most courses now you've seen go to some type of lightweight rolling, something that I would say 15 years ago was kind of new, but now is almost a standard. Again, the more you roll greens, the more you reduce friction, the increased speed you're going to have. A lot of courses, but not all, are using plant growth regulators, which essentially reduces the ability of a plant to grow, and there's different types of them. But essentially the plants grow by cell elongation, and you're reducing the clipping yield, which is going to, again, keep the height of cut lower throughout the day and the greens more consistent from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m., and then also reduce the amount you have to mow. Fertility levels, to go back to Jeff's question, you know, about finding balance of maintenance and playability. And the more you fertilize grass, the faster it grows, the slower the speeds are going to be for golfers. So it's really finding that balance between optimum health that can withstand 20, 30, sometimes 40,000 rounds a year and stay alive, versus giving those factors or conditions that golfers demand. And then lastly, growth habit. For 25 years on NBC, I heard Johnny Miller always talk about grain. You know, everything was down grain or into the grain. And the irony of that is on a lot of these tournament courses, they're mowed so short, there's no grain because there's barely any grass left on them. But, you know, that was his most favorite word, and he's not liked by most superintendents as a result of it. But the growth habit of grass can have an effect on ball speed. You have a lot of courses that do verticutting or brushing to try and stand the plant up and to remove clippings. And the more of that you can do, the more smooth the ball will roll, and then in turn, the faster it will roll. But with everything you do to promote green speed, you're affecting plant health negatively. And the faster you want your greens, the more it's going to cost. So I think it's important not to compare from course to course, or if there's a PGA event that you guys go play, know that maybe that superintendent is ramping up for that and allocating more labor dollars to give you those conditions. And you may go back home to your course and your home superintendent may not have those resources. So the faster you want greens, the more it costs. The faster you want greens, the more risk you're running of killing the greens. And the faster you want greens, the slower pace of play is typically going to be, right? When you're lining up your third putt from 5 feet away because you keep blowing everything by, it's just going to add strokes to everyone's game, and it's going to slow down pace of play, especially in a time where a lot of us are seeing more rounds and we're trying to get people through the golf course. So it's all about balance, about knowing your membership. And then once you kind of identify where you think speed should be based on all these factors, it's educating your membership on why things are that way and why you can't have Oakmont greens every day. And you guys as professionals can really help the superintendent communicate that message, as well as the board of directors and hopefully the green committees. So that was a lot, and I know that's always a polarizing topic, so I don't know if there's any questions that came in on that matter or not.
Yeah, one just came in from Judd Caruso. He asked what your opinion is on the USGA's Turf Advisory Service.
Well, I don't really want to make this about my opinions. They're an asset for sure. Their mission is the same as the USGA's mission, which is to promote the game of golf. And the Turf Advisory Service is really to help educate the members on, a lot of these factors I'm talking about. They've done a great job through increased use of social media over the last few years with short videos on YouTube, as well as the articles they have. And I've always used their consulting service and had found that they're a great asset.
Greg, we used the USGA's advisory service when I was at a club in northern New York. Do you see certain types of clubs using the USGA service more than others? In other words, maybe clubs that don't have a seasoned superintendent, or certainly courses that have adverse growing conditions. Or is it more universal than that? Am I oversimplifying what they do?
Yeah, I guess it's not a question I ask colleagues, like whether they use them or not. I think it's really the club's philosophy. I will say that USGA letterhead seems to go a long way with credibility. I found that superintendents say something for years and members just ignore them, and then that turf advisory consultant comes in and puts something on paper on a USGA letterhead, and all of a sudden members start to listen. So I think each club has their own philosophy on what they like to use with consultants and such. And it's not consistent from club to club.
Gotcha. Michael Ladden just asked, how do you extend the length of the hitting season off of the worn season grasses on the range?
Well, I think it's something that we're all starting to learn. I would say 3 or 4 years ago, there was a lot of winter kill on Bermuda grass tees because we had a really cold winter. And for those around Philadelphia, Springfield Country Club was the first in Philadelphia that went to all Bermuda grass fairways to mixed success. Both Lincoln Financial Field and Heinz Field in Pittsburgh are now Bermuda grass. So to answer that question directly, I think we're all continuing to learn. I think the biggest thing is knowing when to reduce traffic on them. Myself personally, I'm only going into my second year of having Bermuda grass, so I'd probably be the wrong person to answer that question with my limited experience. But I think we're all still trying to figure this out as the climate changes. Wilmington Country Club and Bitterman are 2 places south of me that have had Bermuda grass tees for longer than I have that could probably better answer that.
Craig, have you seen where folks can manage the perception of speed with hole location? So when you get into August, those hot months, maybe using some of those more sloped areas to kind of give the perception of the greens being faster, even though the humidity is not allowing it?
Yeah, anytime you put a green on or put a pin on a slope or in the front of a green, where people are going to be above the hole, it's going to appear to be faster. I think there's no better indicator of the ability of hole locations to affect the playability of the golf course than Marion, right? They had the US Open in 2013 and everyone thought they were going to eat it up, and they tucked every pin, and Justin Rose won it. I think he even par or won over, I can't remember. But that was a week that started out with a ton of rain, and I know the green speeds weren't where the USGA wanted them. So maybe not specifically to the speed thing, Jeff, but more the ability to affect the difficulty of the course with that. But anytime you put a pin on a slope, it's going to appear faster for sure. All right, last thing I have is frost delays, and then any last questions I'll be happy to answer. So frost delays are certainly something that there seems to be not always a perfect rhyme or reason, right? So some days there's damage, other days there's not. And there's a lot of different environmental factors that I think can contribute to that. Far more technical than we need to get into. But I think the biggest thing with frost delays as we end this talk is kind of what I started with, is communication. It's the superintendent communicating to the golf staff and the PGA professional, and vice versa back, the professional talking about, how tee times are going to be delayed and what maintenance can be done. And I think every course needs to develop their own philosophy on this. And this is something that we've talked about a lot recently in terms of, should the priority be for optimum playability and conditions after a frost delay, or golf course accessibility? And what I mean by that is, should we get the course open as fast as possible and reduce the amount of maintenance, or should we set a time and give the staff the ability to cut, roll the greens, cut pins, and have the conditions the membership wants, but knowing that they may have to wait another hour? And I think that's something that we at Concord are still trying to figure out. And I would encourage every club to figure out their own policy on that. And then, as I started this with, it all comes down to communication, and communicate that effectively. None of us, as from a superintendent perspective, want the frost delays. It just affects our day just as much as we know it affects your day, in terms of people just hanging around the shop and, unhappy because they can't go out when they said they are. But unfortunately, there's no rhyme or reason. Again, here's some moderate damage, minimal damage maybe going through the rough on one frost delay, compared to something where it almost looks dead another day. And it's difficult to quantify the damage from frost, but I think it's important that it's something that golf professionals understand can cause damage. And as superintendents, we don't always know when it will cause damage. And so a lot of times we're using our best judgment when making decisions. None of us can really predict the future. If we could, I would tell you who was going to win the Super Bowl on Sunday, and we could all bet on it. But we're trying to make our best evaluation of what we see at a certain time, and how things will be, a few hours in the future. And I think it's a learning experience for all of us. But if there's one thing that I can say, if you want to reduce frost delays, that can help, is tree removal. And so this is a picture, I guess 5 years ago now, of our 5th hole. This is left of the fairway, where there was about 30 pine trees, where the sun, on this November, December, wouldn't shine until about 11 o'clock in the morning, and frost would linger until then. We've since removed all those trees, and that area has been seeded with fescue. And if you look to the left of that picture, that's the south, where the sun rises, and everything is getting a lot more sun, and the frost is dissipating much quicker. So I really can't say that there's a lot of science to frost delays. I think, as I said, the biggest thing is communication. It's trying to evaluate or come up with a policy for each membership, knowing that no one, not a professional, not a superintendent, likes frost delays. But if there's something you can do to help reduce them, it would be to get sun on the grass as fast as possible. And that's just another added benefit of tree removal to that. So specifically on your opening holes, I think although tree removal can be an upfront cost, the additional revenue you may be able to gain over the course of a number of years by letting carts out, whether it be 20 minutes to an hour earlier, depending on how much sun, may be worth the investment for each club to consider. And so that is all I had. Jeff had asked me to keep it to an hour. I went a little bit longer. I'm happy to answer any more questions, both on here now, or if you want to contact me via email or cell phone, I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that or anything I may have said here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. I appreciate Jeff asking, and hopefully everyone learned a little something and I didn't bore people too much.
No, if anyone has any questions before we hop off, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask them over the computer here.
Greg, thanks, buddy. I know over the years we've held a few events in Concord, and I can echo your disdain for white paint. So
I had Carl trained. Now I got to retrain Brian now that he's doing your tournament set. So.
I told him not to bring any white paint when he goes over to Concord. That way we don't have to worry about it. So we're all good. Oh my gosh. That was really good, buddy. That was really, really good. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys listening. If anything else I can help with, like I said, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I think too, maybe it's even something where we're down the road. My section president just texted me a few events at Concord ? With a laugh. So yes, we've had a few events at Concord over the years.
Well, Mike's not getting any younger, and I figure his best chance to win is on his course. So
that's right.
Chances I can give him, the better.
The next 3 senior section championships are at Concord, right, Mike? That's how we're going to do it. So,
he's a grandpa now, so he's running out of time.
That's right. Oh gosh. No, I was going to say, it might even be something where when we get to the time where we can gather, maybe there's a little outdoor seminar we can do with some health professionals. Maybe.
Okay.
Excuse me, Greg.
Yes.
How do you manage ball marks and divots in the fairways?
So again, probably something club to club. You guys hear me, or am I hearing an echo? You hear me, Jeff?
Yeah, you're
go
good.
for it now, Greg.
Dan had some feedback.
I'm good.
You're
Yes,
good
sir.
there.
Okay. Ball marks, you encourage the members to repair them, but unfortunately, I think with not only the rounds, but so many new people getting into golf, it's allocating time for the staff to repair them. The faster you can repair them, the better. The quicker they'll heal. But certainly, I think after this last year, with everyone seeing an increase in rounds, certainly I would say a negative effect to the rounds. But as I said, hopefully the revenue offset that. From a divot perspective, I prefer our members to replace the divot versus use sand, if possible. Now, if the divot explodes, then the sand's there to be used. But if the divot can be replaced, that's the preferred method for us. But again, I think that's a club to club thing. I know at some clubs, they don't want members filling them at all. They'd rather go out and use their own mix as a staff. But I think a lot of that's based on, again, club philosophy, as well as, it's the skill of your membership. I guess I'm a little bit fortunate that we have a lot of sweepers. So I don't consider our divots awful compared to a course with maybe a lot more low handicappers that, hit down and through the ball and take a bigger divot.
Greg, I don't know if I asked you this before, but is there any concern that now the courses are using Bermuda grass on ranges that it's being passed on the golf course?
That it's being brought onto the golf course, you said?
Yeah. If they're going from range, on their shoes, if they're going from range to the golf course, that the Bermuda grass can be tracked. Not that.
Yeah, I think there's some thought to that. I think it's very similar to when people talk about, tracking POA from course to course, or from green to green. I think it's something that may occur, but again, I think our job as superintendents is to try and manage that. And, the course is there to be played, and our job is to give the best practice tee we can. And I think most of us with these hot summers are realizing that that's what Bermuda grass, and if there's negative effects that we have to manage, then that's just part of the job.
Greg, it's Harry Hammond. Nice job today.
Thanks. How are you? Yep.
What are you seeing as a difficulty of hiring for your staff?
It is, it's not easy. Yeah, if you do, a few years ago, I presented to our board like a SWOT analysis, SWOT strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And McDonald's is probably has more upside than what we do, right? If you think about, we're asking people to wake up early on weekends and holidays, and then your reward at the end of a hard summer is we're going to lay you off. So it is certainly a challenge for every club. I think there's a lot of people trying some outside the box things, and there's a lot of baby boomers retiring now, where you're seeing some clubs bring in some like overstaffing in the morning with retired guys and giving them golf access. But I think the biggest thing that's coming is probably autonomous mowing, and clubs are going to have to make a decision to make those investments and their return on investment for the robotic mowers. I know the Toro company, which is one of the major manufacturers, and John Deere have both really started to invest in the development of them. But there's always going to be bunkers need to be raked and ball marks and cups. And it's a challenge, I would say, probably for most superintendents you ask, their number one challenge. And I think everybody's trying to come up with different ideas on how to attract people. Because another thing too is a lot of times I started working out when I was 15 at a golf course. I think a lot more parents are, not forcing their kids to get that summer job, and that's limiting the interest we have of people working on golf courses.
Do you think the only answer for this is increasing the wage to attract people, but yet you're still faced with laying the people off in the fall or the winter?
I think it helps. Unfortunately, it sounds like it's almost going to be mandated soon with, you're talking about increased minimum wage, certainly in the state of Pennsylvania. I think it certainly helps, but I think you have to, what I've tried to do, and we've had some success with retention, is try and create those outside the box things, those fringe benefits for people, to try and keep them, their morale up, and even just not to burn people out. Harry, you get up every morning. There's days it's harder than others, and to try and give people breaks and split staffing, part-time staffing. But yeah, look, it all comes down to money, right? So we've seen better retention by increasing our starting wage it was $9 when I got at Concord, and now it's $13. I don't know what you guys are down the street, but it's helped. Not saying it's the answer, but it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, we're about the same in the wage, but thanks, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Last call for questions for Greg. No? All right. Well, Greg, thanks again, buddy. Really appreciate you saying that was great stuff. We'll follow up. You can certainly, if you're, as you offered, I can certainly, share your email with everybody.
Yeah, please do.
If they want to follow up, but we'll certainly be in touch soon. And, thanks again to you and Darren and Don for, your help and your collaboration with this. So certainly appreciate it, man.
You got it. Thank you guys for listening.
Thanks, Greg. Good luck.
Stay warm.